Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hello and welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host Ijama and I thank you for joining me for this episode. This episode is going to be slightly different from the usual episodes where I interview someone else. This episode is going live on December 20th, 2017. And a week ago today, precisely on December 13th, 2017, the CEO of Etsy, Josh Silverman, held an Open Forum Q&A with Etsy sellers, and it was in the Etsy forums. And so this week, what I'm doing is I'm just going to recap the questions that he responded to and what his responses were, just in case you didn't get a chance to join in and follow along with the Q&A last week. Now, I will quote verbatim what the questions were and what Josh's responses were. And I'll indicate when I'm quoting exactly what was said. I'll say begin quote, and then I'll say what it was, and then end quote. At least I'll try to as much as possible, but you should pretty much be able to tell which, who asked the question and when, and his response. And when he did the Q&A, it appears that he took some time to look up the shops of the people whose questions were selected to be answered. And so in his responses, there were some pleasantries and he would make some remarks, for the most part, really nice remarks about what people were selling, I guess just to convey that he actually was looking at their shops, and so he would say something very personal to their shops. And then also sometimes when the sellers asked questions, there was some additional extraneous information, like they would talk about their Etsy story or their shop's background or their history on Etsy. So I'm going to leave out all the extraneous information. If you really want to know what was said or those additional things, you can go to the Etsy forum. I will link back to the actual forum thread so you can read it yourself. In this episode, I'm just going to stick to the question and then the answer so you get just the information. Now, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Before I do that, there was a video that Josh put out before the Q&A session. And so I will link to that video because in some of the answers he gives, he references that video. He also references a Q&A session that was held by one of the Etsy, what's her position? Her name is Althea something. She's one of the corporate folks at Etsy, and she held a Q&A session as well. And so he references that too. I will link to that forum thread as well so that you have it. When I get to the question, I'll tell you who she was yeah. Okay, so let me go ahead and begin. And so before he started, he said, and I quote, "I know this is an especially busy time for you, but I wanted to check in before the end of the year. As I mentioned in my recent video in the third quarter, we saw an overall acceleration in sales growth for new and existing shops. While sales increased in the third quarter at an accelerating rate, in other words, sales are now growing faster than before. I know some of you in this thread have seen them go down for your individual shops. I want to emphasize that your success is important to us, and the work we've done so far is just the beginning. We have some exciting things in store for the new year that I believe will have a meaningful impact on your businesses. I can't give you all the details on our 2018 plans just yet, but I'll share as much as I can in this thread and continue to update you in the new year." End quote. So that's just some background. And the video that he is referencing there is the video I'm going to put a link to in the show notes for this episode, so you can easily watch it, or you can watch it in the forum. The first question comes from Rebecca from Land and Sea Gems. And she asks, her question was actually directed to Althea, but I guess maybe she didn't have a chance to answer it then, so he's responding. And she has two questions. The first question is, will Etsy ever have a customer service department that offers a phone line or online chat/help? And the second question is, are there any plans to improve how sellers are found/seen on Etsy that will reduce the countless hours spent on SEO? And will Etsy's SEO become more aligned with Google-friendly titles? And this is Josh's response. Okay, begin quote. I am committed to delivering world-class member support, which these days must include real-time access to help by phone or live chat, for instance. Over the past few months, we have been making investments to significantly expand access to more support channels, and these investments are already starting to bear fruit. We introduced English language phone support back in 2013, and I'm excited to say we just expanded it to 24 hours, 5 days a week. That's in addition to the phone support we offer on Saturday and Sunday between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We're getting ready to move to full 24/7 phone support early next year. We'll also experiment with new support channels in 2018. For instance, you may see new offerings like live chat as we work to bring you new ways to get help. We'll also make it easier to quickly and easily find the answers you need on your own if you prefer. Regarding improvements to search and discovery, this continues to be a major focus for us, as I mentioned in my video. Again, remember, I'm quoting him. In addition to rolling out context-specific ranking, or CSR, we're working hard to get better at understanding what your item actually is based on all of the information in your listings, including image recognition, with less focus on your titles. Eventually, our goal is to have you design your title and item description in a way that most appeals to customers. We'll keep you posted on our progress. End quote. I had a comment to make about that, but I didn't want to interject my comment into the middle of what I was reading. So if I remember what I was going to say, I'll let you know, or I'll put it in the show notes for this episode. But I don't know if you were aware that Etsy does have, you are able to reach Etsy they have a contact phone number that will, someone can call you from. I'll put information about that in the show notes for this episode. All right. The next question comes from Patricia from the Old Barn Door. Begin, quote, when will you be appointing someone to the senior leadership team totally responsible for vintage and antique items? And in this, end quote. For Patricia's question, I like how she expanded on who the ideal candidate for this position would be. So this is one of the few questions where I'm going to read the additional information that she gave because I think it was nice. So she says, begin quote, someone with a core competence in this area who understands how to place and promote it effectively and link these items to current trends. There is so much more to vintage than furniture or jewelry. Someone responsible for making sure vintage and antiques are given balanced placement in Etsy promotions. Someone who will listen to knowledgeable and committed sellers of vintage and antiques to truly understand our needs, thereby making us even more effective and prosperous for ourselves and Etsy. Someone who will truly champion our requests for more robust and meaningful categories. End quote. And I think I really like that because I sell vintage items. And so I liked that this question was selected. Now, here is Josh's response. Begin quote. Etsy is committed to the success of vintage and antique items, and it's the job of the entire leadership team, including Linda Kozlowski, our Chief Operating Officer, Kruti Patel Goyal, our General Manager of Seller Services, and myself, to ensure we deliver on this. For instance, we recently started highlighting vintage items in new ways, including dedicated Throwback Thursday shopper emails and social media promotions. We promoted vintage items to holiday shoppers in our Vintage Time Traveler gift guide, and we regularly pitch reporters stories about our robust vintage offerings. We'll continue to look for new ways to promote the diverse array of great vintage finds available on Etsy. End quote. I don't know about the Throwback Thursday. I haven't I don't recall receiving anything, but then again, he did say shopper emails. Maybe I only get seller emails. But I did see the Vintage Time Traveler gift guide, which is kind of neat. And I looked to see if any of my items were in there, but they weren't. Okay, next question is from Emma Wyatt from Emma Wyatt Art. And she says, begin quote, I really would like to know why when the free shipping, ready to ship in one business day, etc. options are selected in search, that it defaults to your own country. As a UK seller, most of my customers are from the US. Etsy is not widely known here, and I have noticed a drop in orders from America this season and a drop in sales as a whole. End quote. And this is Josh's response. For the past few months, we've been working on helping you have a successful holiday season. As part of that work, we're testing out ways to highlight items that are ready to ship in one business day or within 3 business days, so you can attract more last-minute shoppers and extend your holiday sales season. We tested the change you referenced extensively with buyers, both inside and outside the US. During qualitative research, buyers told us that it made sense to limit their search to their own country, which is why that's the default filter. Buyers also understood how to remove the location filter if they wanted to expand their search to other countries. During the quantitative test, less than 0.5% of buyers applied this filter, but those buyers were more likely to make a purchase. End quote. Now, I will say, and I think I mentioned this in another podcast, that I got an email from Etsy saying regarding this issue about my processing time. And essentially, it was saying that even though I have indicated in my policies and my shipping policies that I will ship my items within 1 to 3 business days, historically, I ship within 1 business day. And so the email was encouraging me to change my shipping or my processing or my ship by date, I can't remember which one, to 1 business day, so that I would show up in my listings would show up in more searches, because since I was already shipping within 1 day, it would just make sense to just make it official and say in my policies that I was going to ship within 1 business day. So that way last minute shoppers would be more apt to buy from me. I considered doing it, but I decided not to. And the reason is I just like to give myself some padding with some days, just in case something happens, in case life happens and I just can't get to fulfill my order within 1 business day. I like to know that I have up to 3 business days to fulfill my orders. But the truth is, for the most part, unless there's something absolutely catastrophic, I do tend to fulfill my orders within one business day. So I figured if Etsy can see that, maybe they'll go on historical data based on the fact that I do fulfill within one business day without me having to actually change it in my policies. So that's why I didn't change it. But apparently it seems like if you do officially say you will ship quickly, then that will, it sounds like that might benefit you in search for, last minute shoppers. And I don't know if that's only going to last for this holiday selling season either, just because when it's all over, maybe everything will go back to normal. Okay, moving on. Next question is from Personal Design Boutique. And the Etsy shop is Personal Design Boutique. And the question is, begin quote, how important is it for current shops to grow? With constant testing and changes, it is very hard for current shops to grow because they are constantly trying to redo listings to keep up with the constant changes and testing, which in turn keeps shops from adding more items at a steady rate. Or are you only focused on getting new shops open and allowing them some quick success and then moving on to the next set of new open shops to do the same? End quote. And this is Josh's answer. Begin quote. It's absolutely essential that current shops grow. We have more than 45 million items on Etsy, and we're working hard to make it easier for shoppers to discover and buy those items. One of the ways we're doing this is by using data and testing to determine which designs drive the best buyer experience and result in the most sales. Since May, through the use of testing and data, we've launched dozens of changes that have had a positive impact and led to sales increases. It's important to note that sales are higher on average for both new and existing shops, so there's a positive impact overall. In addition, our buyer net promoter score was substantially higher at the end of the third quarter versus the second quarter, which we believe is a positive response to the recent product changes. This is an encouraging indicator of the likelihood that buyers will come back and buy more, as well as promote Etsy to their friends and family. We've gotten a lot of feedback from sellers that testing is disruptive, but it's essential to our success. I'd also like to add that testing isn't unique to Etsy. It's a best practice adopted by virtually all e-commerce sites and, for that matter, all websites. End quote. So there you have it. Next question is from Susan from Maiden Lane Boutique. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I will link to all these Etsy shops because I do want to give them some credit for the questions that they answered. So you can go check out their Etsy shops. I'll have links to each of them in the show notes for this episode. Okay, Susan from Maiden Lane Boutique. And her question is, begin quote, would like to know what Etsy will be doing to address the sudden and very noticeable drop in sales, drastically affecting long-time established shops. There is a widely held belief among sellers that Etsy is purposely featuring new shops on the first few pages in order to give their shops a quick jolt and a kickstart. End quote. When I read that question, that was news to me, but I found it really interesting, so I really wanted to know what Mr. Silverman was going to say. And here is his response. Begin quote. While not every seller is experiencing sales growth, overall sales growth has accelerated as of the third quarter. Many sellers have seen sales grow faster this year than last, and sales are higher on average for both new and existing shops. That said, I know we have a lot more work to do and we're not slowing down. One of our top priorities over the past few months has been improving search to ensure that the most interesting, unique, and compelling items are getting surfaced to buyers, which has helped improve sales. In my recent video, I talked about the rollout of context-specific ranking. I also talked about how we're getting better at understanding what an item is based on all the information in your listings and showing personalized results most relevant to the specific buyer. These are just two of the ways we're making it easier for shoppers to search for and discover items on Etsy. We expect the successful search and discovery products we've launched since May to deliver nearly $100 million in incremental annualized sales, which is further evidence that improving search on Etsy can have a positive impact and deliver more sales to our sellers. Based on feedback from sellers, we are also investing in tools and services designed to give you more control over the success of your business. For example, in 2018, we'll be rolling out improved analytics to help you optimize your shop's performance and more ways to promote your business and connect with buyers. To your specific question about search, we boost new shops and new listings in relevant search for a very brief time to give them a chance to be seen. After this quick boost, the new items will appear as they normally would in search results. This practice, which is common in e-commerce and retail in general, has been in place on Etsy for the past few years. End of quote. So I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that. But if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you might have heard me tell the story about my first item on Etsy that sold. I put the listing up, and within like the first half hour it sold. I hadn't even finished putting up my second listing. Now I have no idea if that's a result of what Josh said in this response, but personally I didn't know that new shops got a quick boost, as he called it, in search, but that's interesting. Okay, next question is from Miss S from Glass Palace Arts. And she gives some background. Everyone kind of gives some background, but I'll boil down her question. I'll quote what her questions are. Begin quote. Will you be more specific as to how the search algorithm has changed with the introduction of Blackbird and AI? What changes do we sellers need to make in order to get found again with these search changes? The help articles pretty much say the same thing as they did before AI was introduced. Will those be updated? End of quote. And now, Mr. Silverman's response. Begin quote. I touched on some of your concerns about sales in my response to Susan above. To your question about the search algorithm, the way we match search terms to listings hasn't changed, and our guidance remains the same, including recommendations for keywords, titles, and categories. What has changed is how we rank search results. Through context-specific ranking, we're personalizing search rankings in real time using information about the shopper, time of day, and other context-specific factors. This new approach is leading to an increase in sales in the marketplace. As I mentioned to Susan, we do boost new shops and new listings for a very brief time to give those shops a chance to be seen. That may explain some of the search results you're seeing. After this quick boost, the new items will appear as they normally would in search results. End quote. Okay, next question is from Robin from Custom Portrait Art. Is pattern going to stay and be enhanced as promised? Yes or no, end quote. And Josh's response is, begin quote, we invested heavily in Pattern during the first half of 2017, including our launch of the number one requested feature from Pattern sellers, the ability to list items on Pattern that do not appear in your Etsy shop, including items that don't meet our handmade or vintage marketplace policies. We're dedicated to Pattern, and we have some exciting improvements planned for next year based on requests from sellers, including deeper customization options. Stay tuned for more details, end quote. When I saw this question, I thought, oh my goodness, I should have gone on because I want to find out what the plans for Etsy Studio are. I had someone comment on one of the posts I did on one of the podcasts, and that was episode 200. No, I don't recall what episode it was, but someone had commented because I said in one of the podcasts that something about Etsy Studio, and he sent a link to a New York Times article that referenced what Etsy, that basically that went into some background about all what has been going on with Etsy over the last year. And it was really interesting. I found it. It was podcast episode 199 when I talked with Anna of Anna Fine Jewelry. And I mentioned that I wasn't sure if or how much effort I should be putting into Etsy Studio. And so he left a comment and linked to an article in the New York Times. So I will link to that episode and the episode in the New York Times. It's a very, very good read. It's kind of long, but it's really interesting. It gives so much information about what has been going on at Etsy over the last year, and it's very in-depth. So I would highly recommend that you read that article for yourself. So I'll include a link to it in the show notes for this episode. All right. The next question is from Terry Johnson from Sawtooth Wood Design. Begin quote. As sellers, we need a way to calculate FedEx shipping in advance or allow our customers to calculate it for themselves. This has been a real frustration as there is no way to know how much of a discount FedEx will give us Etsy sellers over their regular rates. And there is no way for us to calculate it until someone actually buys something. Then, end quote. Then he says some other stuff, and then here's the question. Begin quote. Why do you offer the service for USPS but not FedEx? And why don't you offer UPS and some freight options? End quote. Then he says he gives some more explanation. Well, he says some other things and then begin quote again. This second question is separate from the FedEx question. So he actually has she has two questions in here. So the second one is, begin quote, visits are supposed to be the number of people and views. The number of people and views are supposed to be the number of things they looked at. But then when you go to listings, it has visits and they never match the visits or views on the traffic page. Can you show every single thing my visitors have looked at? I've also seen both numbers on the traffic page suddenly drop partway through the day, end quote. And this is Josh's response, begin quote. Improving the shipping experience for both buyers and sellers is a top priority. To your specific questions, we're working on giving you calculated shipping for FedEx, and we'll keep you updated on our progress. We regularly evaluate shipping partnerships that will bring you the most value, and we're looking into adding freight options for shop owners who sell heavy items. We'll update you on our progress. End quote. If you live in the US, just FYI, next year, 2018, USPS rates are going up. I meant to say that at the beginning of the episode. So get ready. You might need to adjust your shipping rates or however you have it set up. But postal rates are going to be going up in 2018 again. And that's for US based sellers. I'll find something that has the new rate so that you know. And I believe they're going up by somewhere between 3 and 6 to 6.5% of what they are now. So I'll put more information in the show notes, but I just wanted to let you know that. Now back to the question from Terry Johnson. This is the second. This is Josh's answer to his or her second question. And begin quote. Regarding stats, the discrepancy you're seeing between visits and views is likely due to the fact that we update these stats at different times during the day. Views update in real time and visits update a few times a day. We've heard from other sellers that this isn't ideal, and we're keeping that feedback in mind as we plan continued improvements for the stats tool. It's also possible that your overall visits and listing views don't always match up because some of the visits you're seeing are to other parts of your shop, such as your shop home or reviews. End quote. And next question is from Senine Esco. I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. And Senine Esco is from Mountain Spirit Jewels. And the question is, begin quote, what is Etsy's plan if net neutrality is repealed? If Etsy is forced to pay for the fast lane, how is that going to affect seller fees? Can Etsy and the sellers afford this? What is the vibe at headquarters? As a community, are we going to be okay? End quote. I really like this question. Back in episode 197 of the podcast, I had a discussion with Tayaba, and we did talk about net neutrality and what she was doing as an advocate representing, she sent a letter to that Etsy sellers got in our email regarding net neutrality and just asking us to take action and send letters to our representatives and so on and so forth. I will link to that episode in the show notes for this episode so you can listen and learn some more about net neutrality, how it will affect you as an Etsy seller, and all that. Okay, here is Josh's response. Begin quote. Right now, our plan is to keep fighting alongside our community to protect net neutrality. Last week, we asked Etsy sellers to contact their representatives in the United States Congress and ask them to stand up for net neutrality. I'm thrilled to say that 14,600 sellers have taken action since then, sending more than 47,000 messages to Congress. I also just published an op-ed in Quartz, as have Etsy sellers in Dayton and Fargo. Tomorrow, we expect the FCC to vote to overturn the protections our community fought to preserve. But that won't be the end of our fight to protect a free and open internet. Instead, it will mark the start of the next chapter. As the fight moves from the FCC to Congress and the courts, we don't expect big cable companies to demand payment from Etsy and others in the short term. That would undermine their claims that net neutrality rules are unnecessary and make it easier to overturn tomorrow's vote. I believe we can still win this fight, and I hope you and other members of the Etsy community are willing to keep up the pressure. There's still time to send a strong message to your representatives by filling out our simple form, which you can find at etsy.me/NN. Rest assured, we are fully committed to keep Etsy a thriving marketplace. If you're interested in reading the op-ed I mentioned, check it out on Quartz. End quote. I will put a link to that op-ed article that he mentioned that's in Quartz. So if you're interested in reading it as well, then you can read it too. Also, just to remind you, because this Q&A happened on December 13th, when he says last week, he means the week before that. So sometime in early December, just so you keep track of all the timing. All right. Next question is from Helena Briggs from H. Briggs Photography. In the video interview, begin quote. In the video interview with Josh at 3.09 minutes, 2 images can be seen, which show the impact of CSR on search results. In the after image, I noticed there are 2 identical listings showing up on the same search page. I'd be interested to know if anything is being done to stop this clumping and to limit only 1 listing per seller per page. End quote. And here is Mr. Silverman's response. Begin quote. In the laundry basket example we shared, the search results included listings for 2 baskets that were listed separately in different sizes. I'd like to address such clumping, which has been a hot topic lately. Our system limits the number of listings per seller that can return within the first few pages of results for any given query. This allows us to help buyers experience the breadth of items available on Etsy, which, as we've learned through data and testing, increases the likelihood they'll make a purchase. We'll continue to analyze the data to make sure we're helping buyers find what they're looking for within our diverse collection of listings. We need to do a better job at delivering breadth and not just depth. I agree this is an area where we need to improve, and we are making significant investments to do so. End of quote. So again, I'll have a link to that video. You can go and look at it. It's at the 3.09 marker minute. So if you just want to fast forward to look at the example that Helena is referencing, you can, or Helena. Next question from Lisa from Ivan and Lucy. Begin quote. I would like to ask Mr. Silverman how he and the Etsy team plan to educate buyers on and actively promote the premium value of handmade items as opposed to mass-produced items. The emphasis on sales is a bit disconcerting, as it implies, at least for me, a race to the bottom with the likes of Amazon and eBay. Some of us make items one at a time, and our production time for one item can be weeks. End of quote. And this is Mr. Silverman's response to her. Begin quote. Over the past few months, I have emphasized how important sales would be this holiday season and encouraged sellers to join our site-wide sales event. Sales are ubiquitous across e-commerce sites and brick-and-mortar shops of all sizes during the holiday season. This isn't something unique to Amazon or eBay, and it's our job to give you the tools you need to compete in this environment. I know running sales and promotions isn't right for every seller, but our Labor Day sale proved that they can create a benefit site-wide. As I mentioned in my video, sellers across the site saw more orders during the sale, and on average, sellers who participated in the sale sold more than during the same weekend last year. Even sellers who didn't participate in the promotion got more sales that weekend. We want to amplify all the great work you're already doing and help buyers feel confident that if they purchase from your shop, they'll receive their order before the holidays. That's why we've been working to highlight products that are not only special, but also ship quickly. That said, many of our sellers make their items to order, and we're looking for more ways to help buyers understand why those items may take longer ship. One quick win example is adding the words, "This item is made just for you," above processing times on listing pages for items that take longer to ship. We also tested out adding the seller's profile photo near processing times to underscore that a real person is making the item. These small changes started as tests and the data was clear. The changes helped communicate to buyers how special the products on Etsy are and led to higher conversion rates. We plan to build on this work next year in an effort to connect more buyers to unique items on Etsy and inspire them to make a purchase. These connections are at the heart of our mission to keep commerce human. My goal remains to help Etsy be its best self, not a version of another company. Our mission, values, and uniqueness make us who we are, and staying true to that is the key to our success. End quote. Next question is from Amy of Amy's Arts. And so this question, I guess, was part of this question came out as a result of the Q&A that Althea Erickson had. So first I'll quote a section of that Amy quotes, and it says, begin quote, "From the Q&A with Althea Erickson." And this is a quote inside of the quote. "To that end, we have set an internal growth target for the number of sellers earning over a specific dollar threshold." End quote again. And now this is Amy's question. Begin quote. "I read this as we will manipulate search, in parentheses, internal growth, so that when the seller has reached their quota, in parentheses, dollar threshold, we will then send their items to the basement to give other sellers a chance to meet their quotas, in parentheses, dollar threshold. What does this mean?" End quote. And I hope that makes sense. And this is Josh's response. Begin quote. "No, we will not be manipulating search or establishing quotas to reach this target. The intent of the goal is to encourage product improvements that benefit a broad swath of sellers and increase the total size of the pie for everyone. An example of that might be improvements to the user experience or listing quality that increase sales and therefore average income for all sellers. The intent of the impact goal is to ensure that, on balance, the product improvements we pursue have a broad and meaningful impact on all of our sellers' lives." Althea Erickson, Etsy's Global Policy Director, did a great job of explaining this goal in detail in her recent Forums Q&A. I encourage you to check out her response here. End quote. And then he puts a link to the Q&A from Althea Erickson. So I will also put a link to the Q&A from Althea Erickson so you can go and read what she said about this whole quota thing. Next question is from Rena KC of Green Bee KCT Towels. And the question is, begin quote, "I'd like to be able to edit/add items to my sales and coupons in the marketing section," end quote. And here is Josh's response. "This is something we heard from many sellers after launching the sales and coupons tool in August. Based on that feedback, we recently released an update that allows you to add items to existing sales and remove items from sales. To do so, click the name of your promotion in the sales and coupons section in Shop Manager, and then select Edit Included Listings. From there, you can add or remove listings from a sale. We plan to continue to make improvements to our sales and coupons tool next year based on suggestions from sellers. Your feedback is invaluable, so keep it coming," end of quote. And that was the last question he answered. And then Josh Silverman wrapped up the discussion with this, and I quote, "I know many of you have a lot more questions about search in particular. I'll keep you posted as we continue to invest in improving the search experience. For those of you who are seeing sales go down for your individual shops, I want to reiterate that we're committed to your success and we'll continue to work hard to make Etsy the best platform for your creative businesses. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I look forward to giving you more updates on how we plan to support your success in the new year," end quote. So that's it. So I'd like to know what you think. First of all, did you like the selection of questions that he answered? Were you able to relate to some of them or none of them? I could relate to some of them personally, so I liked the selection. Some of them not so much, but they were good to, like, it was like, okay, that's good to know or good to hear, because some of them I wasn't aware of certain things. And then what did you think of Josh Silverman's responses? Did they leave you with more questions or give you more hope and confidence in what Etsy is doing? So I would really like to hear your own opinions and continue this discussion. And if you would like to, if you have some input, if you'd like to give your own feedback, can you please either come to the show notes for this episode and leave a comment in the comment section, or if you want to, I invite you to come and join the Etsy Conversations podcast Facebook group, and you can start a conversation about something you heard in this particular Q&A, or you can join another conversation going on about it. And then, of course, there's the Etsy forums right where the Q&A was held. You can always go in there and see what other people are saying. I don't hang out very much really over there. I'll look at it from time to time, but that's another place where if you want to join this conversation, you can do that. And then also, I just like to ask, I know I don't ask this very often, but sometimes podcasting feels like, I'm talking in a silo because there's no audience that I'm talking to. But I'd really like to know what you think about this format of the podcast. If you can give me feedback on this, you can either leave it in the comment section for this episode, or you can send me an email to convome.com. And I just like to hear if you like this type of format for this particular podcast or not. I'll continue to do the interviews, so don't worry about that. I do have some more guests lined up, but I wanted to keep you updated on what happened in this last Q&A. It appears there'll be more, and when Josh has more Q&A sessions, I will be sure to update you. If you like this type of informational format, I just want to remind you that I will be launching something similar. It will be more like this. It's a membership program where I basically will give you Etsy tutorials and up-to-date information about what's going on in the Etsy community in digestible format. You just listen. It will be updated very regularly, and I will be launching that right now. My plan is to launch in January. Everyone who is on the early notification list, you will get that email as soon as the doors open. If this is something that interests you, I would love it if you put your name on if you let me know, and I will put your name on the early notification list. If you go to convome.com/read to me and just say ping me when it's ready or something of that nature, and that will send an email directly to me. I won't add you to a mailing list. I will simply use your email to let you know once it's ready so that you can go and check it out. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Festivus, whatever you celebrate. And if you don't celebrate anything, I hope you still enjoy this time of the year. And I will be back with a new episode next week.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.